This Week in Startups is brought to you by LinkedIn. A business is only as strong as its people, and every hire matters. Go to linkedin.com/twist and get a $50 credit toward your first job post. Walker Corporate Law, specializing in the representation of entrepreneurs. Visit walkercorporatelaw.com. Salesforce Essentials. Jumpstart sales and support by leveraging the world's #1 CRM at a startup price point at just $25 a month per user. Go to salesforce.com/twist for an additional 50% off and a free onboarding call.
Hey, everybody. It's This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis, and this is the podcast we've been doing for a decade. Yes, that's right. Twice a week for 9 years, once a week for the first year. We're at 900 some odd episodes, and one of the great joys of my life is being able to interview founders and investors and talk about their journey and maybe learn a little bit along the way. And y'all seem to love our news roundtables. That's where we look at the news in tech, entrepreneurship, angel investing, etc. And today we have two extraordinary individuals. Ryan Block, the @Ryan on the Twitter. He's the first part of the First Name Club. Is the founder of Begin, which he also has begin.com.
Begin.com and @Begin on Twitter.
Unbelievable. And previously, of course, was the editor-in-chief and the head of product at Engadget, which is where we first worked together. Mm-hmm. Explain to the audience what Begin is.
Serverless app platform.
Okay, what does it mean? We've heard of the cloud, and we've heard of server-based computing, client-server, and now you're saying
serverless.
Serverless. So wait a second, how do you serve without a server?
So there's always a server somewhere.
Yeah,
it's down there. It's a metaphor.
Okay.
For the abstraction, and the abstraction is now you don't actually have to deal with servers anymore. You just write your code. You put your code on there. It just runs forever. It's kind of crazy.
I got to hear this pitch earlier. It was awesome. I was bitching about my server breaking.
Yeah.
He's like, why do you even have a server?
All right. Well, maybe later we'll make you an app.
I know. Yeah.
It's kind of an unexciting demo because it takes 10 seconds, which of course it should take 10 seconds. It really, in the real world, it does not.
And the idea here is you don't need to have dedicated servers for your app burning your credit card and melting it while you have dedicated servers. Just throw the job up to the server, it runs it, and then it shuts down.
Yeah, so they have these little micro containers that boot up almost instantaneously. In Amazon land, they're called Lambdas, but they have equivalent services in other clouds. We're an Amazon first platform, and yeah, they boot up almost instantly. They run and bill in increments of 100 milliseconds, so you only pay for what you use, which is the reason why a lot of big companies really like this right now. Security profile is great, and they just kind of keep running.
The security profile is great because the server's not there.
Right. There's no open ports. There's no long-running processes. Everything is super locked down.
The server's going up and down, running the job, so there's no target. Is that correct, or less of a target for hackers?
Well, yeah, I mean, everything is abstracted into the service layer. So you just fire an event payload at it. So that might be like you load a web page. Right. So all of begin.com is running serverless. If you go to begin.com, there are no servers there. So every time you request begin.com, it sends the request to one of the services in our platform, which runs on AWS, and that goes to a Lambda, which is a cloud function. And that just does a little bit of compute, tiny little bit of compute, and then it sends back the response. As opposed to you have a box, with a container or Kubernetes or a cluster or any of that stuff that you have to maintain and update and all that BS. It just runs.
All right. Well, congratulations on that. And Parker Thompson is with us. Last time you were on the show must have been 5 years ago when you were doing Startup L. Jackson, which was classic. Your parody account where you just destroyed VC and entrepreneurial Twitter.
Hopefully in a good-natured way, but
I think so. And you've become part of the intellectual resistance, I call it.
Please just don't say thought leader.
Thinkfluencer. No, if you don't follow PT, so PT has the best, shortest Twitter handle here. He's also a partner at Angellist. Previously, he was at 500 Startups, and previously he was at Pivotal Labs with a bunch of my friends over there. But 2016, that was only 2 or 3 years ago. The Startup L. Jackson account, what was the inspiration for that when you started it? Were you just like watching?
I think it's like a lot of, stories. It just starts out kind of dumb. At the time, my friend Eric Reese, who I think was writing his book.
Yeah.
And there was this book that came out, and Go the F to Sleep. Do you remember this
Yes,
kid's
of
book?
course. Yeah.
So Samuel L. Jackson had recorded the audio for that, and Eric on Twitter had mentioned he was recording the audio for his own book. And I said, I'll wait for the Samuel L. Jackson version.
Wow.
And I just thought, gosh, the idea of Samuel L. Jackson commenting on tech would just be kind of funny. So my friend Roger and I actually made the account initially. He was busy building a startup, and so, did a little bit here and there, and I had more time to just heckle.
So for all the time that it was a mystery, the answer was hiding in plain sight.
I mean,
You never deleted that original tweet?
No, I think
people knew.
It was an inside joke.
Yeah.
I mean, that was part of the fun of it, was people knew, but if you were in the joke, you didn't want to
ruin
spread it, right? Yeah, ruin the joke.
That was an interesting part about it, because people were like, I know who it is. I was like, don't tell me. I want to keep guessing. I want to figure out who it is. But it seems like there's now like a group of folks on Twitter, yourself, Antonio, Naval, just like intellectually rigorous people who question the insanity on Twitter on a regular basis.
Or maybe participate. Some days you're on one side, some days you're on the other.
It is crazy. Like, Twitter has gone bonkers.
Yeah.
Do you think of quitting it? You're addicted, yeah?
Yeah. I mean,
You're full on addicted?
It's the best and the worst, right? It's a wonderful place to interact with the smartest people, but it's also awful. So what are you going to do? It's a package.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It's completely awful, with moments of just transcendence. Like, oh my God, these people are so smart. I'm talking with smart people.
Yeah,
I
totally.
mean,
I don't know. I quit.
You quit?
Yeah.
He's got rioted. He quit.
Okay, that's fine.
It does take a ton of time.
You know what's great? Like having real conversations with smart people.
It is, actually.
But then you have to put on pants and leave your house.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like,
The pants are always an impediment. We're going to have to go no white shot for the show. I just want to...
Can I just say, though, like, of all of the fake tech Twitter accounts, Startup L. Jackson definitely the best one. Like, way better than even at the height of his powers, fake Steve Jobs. Like, way better.
Yeah, fake Steve Jobs was just a little too angry. I felt there wasn't, like, any joy.
Yeah.
The thing is, if you want to do parody, there has to be some amount of joy in it. You can't just be all venom. There's got to be some joy and joie de vivre.
I think that's right. I mean, I think for me, it's also a good way to make fun of the great thing about it being anonymous is you can just make fun of yourself and no one knows. So you've got to see the joy in it, but you can also see the absurdity in the whole thing.
The Swift on security account, I think, is pretty amazing.
That
Pretty good.
That was pretty good.
Pretty good.
I feel like it's getting a little tired.
Yeah.
It's getting a little tired.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel fresh to me anymore, but what do I know? I'm not on Twitter anyway.
You should create a service one. Okay, listen, Apple had a huge announcement this week. They're obviously trying to embrace services revenue now that the iPhone, as expected, has hit peak iPhone. I guess people don't feel the need to update their iPhone as frequently. And so they announced Apple News Plus, which to me felt like an announcement from 2004. 300 magazines are participating in this, and you can get the Wall Street Journal, but maybe in a bridge version for $10 a month. PT, what do you think of this Apple News thing? This is like,
I mean, I think broadly these comments are right. Like, they launched a bunch of stuff to make a bunch of money, and then we can talk about each of the services. I think the Apple News one is the worst one. I mean, when they said, oh, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. For $10 a month, if I can get a bundle of real newspapers, that's super compelling. But if it's not real newspapers, if it's just like the AP feed, and then you got magazines, I guess the question I would ask is, who spends $120 a year on magazines? Because that's your kind of your audience, right? So,
well, yeah, especially when like you subscribe to a magazine one time for 1 year and then you cancel your subscription and then you just seem to keep getting that magazine forever.
Yeah, right. Because you're advertising, they're just trying
they
to
need to build their circ up. I mean, it literally, this announcement is for the 10% of baby boomers and Gen Xers who still love magazines. Young people have never picked up any of these magazines. If you're under 30, what are the chances you've ever purchased any of these magazines?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's uncompelling. I think I'd rather see something that was ad-based, and Apple just doesn't like to do that. So they've sort of said, we're going to launch something, we're going to make people pay for it, and therefore it's going to be not that interesting.
Okay. They also launched this Apple Arcade, and they launched Apple TV Plus. So I guess putting the plus on it means we're going to be charging you in their...
Well, and it's virtual. I mean, that's pretty interesting. You don't have to buy the box anymore. That's a very un-Apple thing that to me was interesting. You can get it on your Roku or wherever now.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But you're paying for it.
Yeah, but you're paying for it, and that's fine.
And they're going to go up
That is very
against-
Apple.
And they're going to go up against Netflix and
Yes.
Amazon Prime.
Yes.
But they had this big Oprah announcement, and I was like, is she bringing her show back or whatever? And it's just like, she's doing 2 documentaries or something. Like, what did they back up the Brinks truck for her? Is that $100 million, you think?
I don't think we know very much about this service yet. We don't know what it cost. We don't know how much they're spending on it. We don't know how committed they are to it. We don't know what the breadth of content is going to be. So they rolled out Oprah. That's cool. I mean, they've got, what, $250 billion in the bank? Something crazy?
Yeah.
So they could
Over that,
compete
yeah.
with Netflix. We just don't know if they're
They
going
just
to
don't
yet.
want anybody to do anything that's adult.
Yeah, and that's fine.
So no Game of Thrones, no Breaking Bad, no Sopranos, no, I don't know.
Do we
Pick
know
your
that
no
they're
Billions.
being that censorial about it?
That's what the trades in Hollywood have been saying, is that they want everything family friendly. And it's like, I think that train has left the station. But now I'm looking at it.
I mean, have they ever been on the App Store? Has any? Come on.
Well, I mean, you could
There's
get
some-
HBO through the App Store and Netflix.
Yeah. I'm just saying, there's like a lot of non-family friendly stuff in the Apple ecosystem.
I guess if it has the Apple name at the beginning, they don't want what follows to include sex or violence.
And that's fair. They are actually making this content, whereas they have plausible
Yes.
deniability if they're carrying music.
They're
that has
funding it.
I mean,
questionable
Disney
content.
seems to have done pretty well with this, right? So
Deadpool is racy, right?
Yeah, they have the Marvel stuff, but I personally don't think that's a problem. I think the question is just we don't know how committed to it they are. We don't know how good the bundle's going to be.
Yeah.
But they can make it viable if they. This is the thing where you can just spend money until it works.
The interesting thing though is, like, if I was watching some we watch like the stand-up comedians on Netflix, and I'm just
Yeah,
thinking,
me
wow,
too.
these comedians are saying things that Apple would never be able to stand behind.
Yeah.
Even Netflix,
Yeah.
I think, would have a hard time standing behind isolated clips from Amy Schumer or Chris Rock, like back in the day now. And I don't know how Apple is going to do anything interesting with the service. So I think Apple News is going to fail. I think Apple TV Plus is going to fail. Apple Music is a huge success, right? Talking
Well,
about tens of
here's the
millions of
thing.
people.
It I don't know if it's going to fail. Seems like it very well could, but I don't even know if it's for the reason that you're outlining. Like, who under 30 is watching TV on a TV screen anymore? Like,
Nobody.
that is not really the thing,
No.
right? So the same way that, like, Apple News Plus feels like an announcement for baby boomers, it kind of feels like the same thing for Apple TV Plus. I mean, granted, I'll probably subscribe and try it out, but I'm an old person, so of course
They
I'm going
need
to.
to bundle this. It's now getting ridiculous. They need to
They'll
have
get there. I mean, they'll
Apple
get to Prime.
Prime.
Yeah.
That's what needs to come, is Apple Prime. Because it's now $10 for news, $10 for music. We'll assume TV is going to be $10. The arcade is going to be $10, maybe. I don't
We
think
don't know that.
they didn't ask the pricing for that. Apple Care, I spend $10 on my 2 terabyte family plan. Apple Care is like $5 a month per phone. So if you have 2 phones in your house, it's another $10. That's $60 a month. Now we're looking at a $700 a year bundle for everything. Cut it in half, $350. Is that a good deal for all of that?
It depends if that's your bundle. I mean, I think people are angsty about, I got my Netflix, I got my Hulu, I got this. It's like, well, at some point, there's going to be a bunch of these bundles, and you're going to pick the 2 or 3 that you want and go with them. So I'm less bearish on the Apple Plus, even given that we don't really know what it is. But, we'll see. And eventually they'll just bundle all
I
this
think the
stuff
most
together.
interesting thing was the Apple Card, which we'll talk about when we get back from this break. Let me just take a moment to talk to you about hiring. Hiring is hard. Everybody knows that. And you know that LinkedIn is the world's largest professional network, and it is the best way to find great talent. 70% of the U.S. workforce is on LinkedIn, and hundreds of thousands of businesses have posted to LinkedIn Jobs over the past year. 22 million professionals view and apply to jobs on LinkedIn, wait for it, every week. And they have the perfect search algorithm. Skills, experiences, location. They match all that and promote your job to the right candidates, and that's including passive searchers. These are people who are not looking for a job on a job board, but if they see the right one, they might take a meeting, like our studio director, Charles. We received 68 candidates in only 2 weeks using LinkedIn's jobs product, and we spoke to 17 of them, and here is the punchline. We spent $140 on the ad. It is amazing. So here's your call to action, linkedin.com/twist, linkedin.com/TWIST, and get a $50 credit, a $50 from JCal for your first job posting. Get in there and get that $50. Well, right now, thanks LinkedIn for supporting independent media like This Week in Startups. What did you think of the credit card announcement? This to me, I thought was the most interesting. An Apple Card engraved with your name on with the Apple logo.
Made out of titanium.
I mean, that's like 100% of people want to pull that out, right? I want that.
I think they got this from the Fire
Festival
documentary. Wasn't that the guy's first company?
Oh, right.
Titanium card.
That's true.
He was doing like
Wow.
a 1080.
That's
right.
legit.
Good pull, PT.
It just came
Absolutely.
to me right now.
It's great for
I mean,
crushing.
I know how much you love
It's
the
great
Fire
for
Festival.
crushing pharmaceuticals, according to the Fry Festival founder. If you have Adderall and you want to chop it up, it's perfect. I'm making that up. I don't know the Fry Festival founder is on Adderall and chopping it up with his metal titanium card, but I suspect.
Oh, I think we know.
I think we know the answer to that.
Yeah.
A great product, right? Like, it seems like 2% cash back on everything was my understanding.
Yep.
No fees.
No predatory interest if you're late.
Yeah.
And they're going to present everything in a non-confusing Apple way.
So I think if you're, you're getting your first credit card, you've already got an iPhone, they've got this audience to advertise it to. That's great. I mean, I'm just a mercenary for cash back.
Yeah.
So I got 2% cash back, but I think Apple, it's, everybody's always switching it up on you.
Yeah.
I think
that number doesn't seem that impressive to me. And
2% cash back.
I use the Amazon card, and that's 5% on Amazon purchases, which feels like an increasingly large amount of my purchases.
I wish.
Wait, you get 5% back on the Amazon card?
Yeah.
On
Dude, where you been?
What?
Yeah.
All right, stop the show. I got to get on my Prime account and get that. Really?
Yeah, I was surprised Apple didn't say we'll give you 10% back on Apple purchases.
Or at least 3 or 4%.
That makes sense. Yes.
I mean, because I buy my stuff on Amazon now. If I'm going to buy something digital, I'm going to buy it on Amazon. It's just a little bit more portable. But if it was 10% cheaper on Apple, I'd think pretty hard about buying it there.
Absolutely.
So, it seems like a great product as is. But
I think 100%.
Or take the card and get one of our services like Apple News Plus for free or half off.
See, that's what I think is going to be the move.
Continue bundling.
If you spend a certain amount on the card, it bundles your News Plus and your music. So if you spend over $1,000 a year on the card, you get the bundle of services free or something. But I could see this being gigantic. Like,
honestly, that looks like a corporate ID badge to me.
It does, actually, with the chip reader in it. But I mean, everybody's going to be a bank now.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I mean, they have a pile of money. This is a great way to spend it. Go be a bank.
But not a cryptocurrency. I wonder if they actually
considered. Thankfully.
I wonder if they actually considered at some point Apple Dollar. Because Facebook is reportedly working on a cryptocurrency of some type.
Yeah, that's because Zuck and Dorsey, all these guys are libertarian crypto nerds.
It's hilarious.
Well, they're just trying to make payments work, and they tried in Messenger, didn't work. They're trying again. We'll see if this one works. I don't know that it's that interesting coming from Facebook, but we'll see. They're smart people.
If they want to make payments work,
that's it. I mean, that is the thing.
Yeah,
I will
blockchain
say about
is definitely
Facebook.
the fast path.
Just like Microsoft's playbook. Microsoft Word was terrible. 2.0 was terrible. 3.0 was terrible. All of a sudden, 4.0, you're like, yeah, what's Word perfect? Like, yeah, Word good enough. I'll just use Word. It's bundled already.
That's bundled. Yeah.
That seems to be their new process. And then
I think I did think it was kind of garbage that they kept talking about how they were so pro consumer and pro privacy, pro data protection. That's pretty neat. No late fees, extremely fair and reasonable interest rates. They have industry standard interest rates.
I thought that was the interesting theme. Like everything was, we don't know what news you've read, so we're not going to target you based on what news you've read. We don't know what you're purchasing, and we're going to give you news recommendations on your phone. The algorithm will be on your phone. We'll never, ever have that data. So it was like they were throwing shade to Google, Facebook.
Yeah, we're going to give you terrible recommendations so that we can say that we're not Google and Google is bad.
And Google's recommendations are going to be so much better because, All right. Interesting Twitter debate about valuations. Are they too high? And are they startup killer? Tons of data on incubators and valuations. Looks like right now people were complaining, at least on the Twitter, about the $15 million Y Combinator caps are back.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of always the debate. And I think people kind of talk past each other in this debate, saying like, oh, you can't value invest in startups. And I think no one's saying that. So let me make a different statement than valuations are too high, just because I think it's a better frame, which is round sizes are too low. If you're raising at $20 million, don't raise $1 million because you're not going to position yourself for success going forward. So I'm not complaining about your valuation. I'm complaining about your round size. You do a party round of 1 million at 20. Good luck with that.
Yeah, and the reason is you've now diluted 5%, let's say, for the million. and now you've only got $1 million to build a $20 million enterprise value. If you don't get to 20 million in an enterprise value, which would be, I don't know, what amount of revenue?
Getting to a Series A, I don't know that it's necessarily a fixed set of milestones around revenue. Often it could just be technology.
But if it was an enterprise software company, you'd be looking at
$2 million, $3 million of revenue, and a clear market leader at this point if you're going to go raise a Series A, right?
Which means you're going to...
It's real tough. It's a high
real
bar.
hard to do.
And so the question is, well, what's your plan B? No one ever thinks about their plan B. We're all special, beautiful unicorns.
Yeah.
But to raise one at 20, you're going to put together that round with a bunch of people who are not going to haggle with you on price, right? And I always think about it as it's infinitely harder to raise $1 million in one check than it is to raise 10 100K checks from a bunch of people who aren't going to be there when you need that bridge because you're at 750K of revenue, right? And so you've actually built some enterprise value. You've just created a structural risk in that round by making dumb choices that's going to kill your company. So I think, the debate ended up being, as some of these Twitter things are, a little bit lower brow than it could have been. But I think
shocked.
Yeah, right. For the founders out there, I think you want to surround yourself with people who can help you think about building a big pie.
Yeah.
And so raise a fair round. Investors shouldn't be screwing you. You shouldn't be thinking about them in this very transactional way. You got to put together a team that's going to help you for the long haul.
Yeah.
And I think that's not the mindset of many companies that are in a position to raise whatever.
Yeah, just say Y Combinator companies are looking to, they've positioned the investors as the enemy. They position them as adversaries, I think. And that, I think, is the big problem, because you get caught in this trap where you had a party round and then things don't go well, like you're saying, and you're at 750 in revenue, you're burning whatever, 50K a month. You got a real business, but now who's going to invest at a 20 million on that business that's proven it can't grow fast?
Here's what I'll give my outsidery, very, very occasional amateur hour and angel investor and full-time entrepreneur. Market's gonna tell these folks, right? If I don't even understand what the debate is, because do I think that is too high, or do I think that is ridiculous or unreasonable? Yeah. So I'm just not going to invest in that. What are we even talking about? Just if you want to opt out, then opt out. And if you want to be, what I would say is probably not super wise, then opt in, and maybe you'll have a good outcome and maybe you won't. To me, I think the real problem is that there's a lot of inexperienced founders out there getting some really bad advice.
That's exactly right. I mean, and people have said, hey, well, this is the market. I think that's right. So to me, the market is not the problem. The market's going to be what it is. The problem is that these founders are doing things that are just going to burn 2 years of their life, right? They're going to burn 2 years of their life. They're going to shut this thing down and they'll have another shot, but it's kind of a bummer, right?
Yeah.
I'd rather founders not burn 2 years of their life with completely unforced errors. So yeah, the market is what it is. And to be fair to YC, I don't actually think that they're, I don't think that the advice people are explicitly getting is, hey, investors are just, they're idiots, be transactional. I actually think it's you look around and everybody else is raising at these valuations and you feel kind of an ego thing around it.
That's definitely it. I mean, I've heard that directly from YC people, that they're trying to set a record. They're like, we want to get to 25 cap,
It's really expensive. Everything is really expensive. Everything, from top to bottom. These prices are not just reflective of the venture capital market. It's reflective of housing costs and what it costs in terms of equity to recruit a great engineer. Top to bottom, everything is insanely priced right now.
Well, but those should be about round sizes as opposed to valuations. So yeah, you need $3 million to get to a Series A in San Francisco. That's a little bit nuts. But actually, you could do that at a 9 post or a 25 post, right? You need more money to get there. It doesn't necessarily imply larger valuation.
And I think, again, some of this is experience and, maybe a little bit of enlightenment. And I'm going to, vaguely pat myself on the back here. But I had an opportunity a few years ago raising a round from an institutional who said, just pick whatever valuation you feel is reasonable, right? And they were doing a few $1 million in the company. Just pick your valuation. And I intentionally picked something that post was sub 10 because I didn't want to fall victim to this trap. Now, granted, the outcome is still yet to be seen because we're still working on stuff. But, that is just a function of me having great advisors and having had experiences. So, that's why I say, To me, the problem is not what is the market going to bear or not bear. I think that that's going to make itself very evident very quickly. It's really, what kinds of advice and inputs are these founders getting?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. The other thing that's kind of a bummer is now there's, I guess, 200 of these startups in the demo day. And my understanding is like the top 5% don't ever go to demo day. They close their round in like week 2 or 3.
All the good rounds are done by demo day, every single one.
Yeah. So basically, if you're going to demo day, it's like if you don't know who the worst player at the poker table is, it's you. Like,
Right. Yeah.
If you're the dipshit like dentist, new angel investor going to demo day and just popping 250 into like 4 companies, you're picking the. Yeah. If you believe it's an outlier based industry, and those people are good at it, the Mark Andreessens or whoever coming in early.
But isn't going to demo day like investing in crypto funds, right? I mean, at this point, is there even anything proprietary about it?
No, it's remnant inventory.
Remnant inventory would be the way to look at it. Yeah.
You do get lucky sometimes. Bobby Goodlott pointed out to me, he said, I got a 200x at a demo day. So great, like you can do it. But the number that I would love to see would be if you indexed the YC batch at their demo day valuations, what's the IRR in that pool?
Right.
And I suspect that's very different than YC's IRR because their cost basis is literally 10x less.
Yeah, it's 1.7.
And then you're seeing some selection bias going into that pool. So
yeah, why doesn't YC release that information, you think?
For obvious reasons.
Yeah, look, they're not obligated to release their numbers. I would love to see some of that data. I think
they operate somewhat transparently.
No. Not with a list of companies, though. No.
I'm saying you could anonymize this.
Yeah, I'd love to see that
this could be aggregate data that they
Here's
put
the thing.
which would frankly like help bolster their case.
They don't want this data out there.
Yeah,
it would be negative. I believe the IRR would be, to your point, PT, from demo day on with those high valuations would be terrible. Now, if you could invest in a YC fund at the investment they're making, you would do that all day long.
And so a lot of those companies get to A and do really great rounds beyond. So, I think the way that more savvy investors look at this is demo day is a nice place to socialize, and you either did the seed before or you're there to sort of mark some of these folks to see what it looks like at the A. And that's fine.
Yeah, it's a big networking event. It's like a cool party now.
Yeah.
Did you go this year? It was on the pier.
I don't go to these things.
I don't go to it anymore either. I don't know if I'm invited actually. If you're critical of them or you're critical of anything, like if you even have this conversation we're having, they will literally put you on the do not fly list and like.
Yeah, I don't feel like I have a bad relationship with those folks, and I'm very frank about the things that I think they could be doing better. We've had very constructive conversations, so I don't mean to be critical of YC, but I just find demo days to not be very useful. And I used to run a demo day, right? They're just right. You go and you see these pitches; they're all polished. It's hard to really know. The good deals are done before. So if you want to get involved in accelerators, go early.
Yeah, week 2, week 3, week 4.
Meet these companies, build a relationship with them is how I think about it.
So can I throw out an alternate theory?
Yeah.
Maybe venture as we know it is unsustainable. The same way that, we as consumers in the society are inevitably driving ourselves towards catastrophic climate change. Valuations only seem to be going one direction year after year. And the pie is growing. And obviously 2019 IPO market is probably going to get a lot of people pretty stoked about the current strategy that they have. But it seems like at a certain point, this is going to become not sustainable. And we're going to have to think about how to change this up. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm just going to throw that idea out there that maybe we're looking at the early moments of venture is dead on its feet. And it's going to have to get rebooted in order to cope with the realities and finances of what tech is in the future.
All right, let's take that question right after we get back from this break. Scott Walker is from the Walker Corporate Law Group, which is a boutique law firm that specializes in the representation of startups and entrepreneurs. And he's been our longest running partner here at This Week in Startups. Walker Corporate Law encourages fixed fees. That's right. They believe that billable hours can reward inefficiency, and their lawyers have decades of experience. No junior associates getting on-the-job training. No. All of them have decades of experience, and they do all the services you can imagine, including mergers and acquisitions, licensing agreements, terms of services, privacy policies. And if you want to talk to the founder, Scott Ed Walker, directly, he's a great guy. Give him a call, 415-979-9998, 415-979-9998. And you can email him, Scott at Walker Corporate Law, or visit walkercorporatelaw.com. Thanks again, Scott, for supporting This Week in Startups for so long. Really appreciate it. It's an interesting question. What do you think? Do you think that the venture industrial complex
you can't talk about venture as one thing.
Let's talk about the venture funds.
Venture is bimodal, right? There are people who do very well.
Yep.
And then when you pile on more money than can be efficiently deployed, you just get a lot of terrible returns on the other end of the distribution, right? So I think that's like when you think about these demo days, the way to think about that is there's a bunch of people who are like, I got my $10 million because I did an angel investment that was good, and now I've got a fund, and I'll write you a $100K check at 20. Like that, the way that I think about it is those funds are always going to be starting and going out of business. And then there's going to be folks who are taking, and maybe a more classic approach is the way to think about it, but there are folks who can find the value, find these things early. Like my strategy is go be first money in, right? And help them put this thing together.
Because you have a great network.
And I think there's a lack of pre-product market fit. It's very hard to sort of look at these things from first principles.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I think that's my comparative advantage. So I'm going to go find these things when they're messy and early and help them get to a point where it's obvious, right? So maybe that's a good strategy. Maybe it's not. But it's not going to demo day and just saying like, great, what's your cap? Here's 50K. I think that's the part that's unsustainable. So it can both be true that we don't.
It's like lazy venture. It's like lazy angel investing versus rolling up your sleeves and doing the work.
Well, I'll throw it out there that even like when you look at the macro industry trends of all the big institutional investors, what is it, like the top 5 to 8%, maybe 10% are actually getting returns year after year, and the other 90% are not. So, I mean, that to me indicates that like we are already sitting on a fairly broken model where most of the people out there who are raising venture funds are not getting returns. Clearly.
Well, they're going to get some level of return. And the way I look at it is a lot of these LPs, like the big ones, are only putting sub 5% into the private companies, whether it's private equity or venture. So probably 1% of an endowment, 2% of an endowment is venture.
And it's risk capital.
Yeah, and I think they're just making a bet. Like, what if I get into the fund where Sequoia has WhatsApp? What if I get into Chris Sacca's fund where he hits Uber and Twitter? You know, I think they're just looking for something to balance out real estate and cash.
I don't think that part of the market is that broken, kind of the post-product market fit. It's interesting and it's changing, and there are going to be winners and losers. To me, the weird part of the market is this seed stage where the LPs are not institutional. It's all the money that couldn't get into those funds and is trying to figure out how to deploy capital into this market. You've got a bunch of emerging managers, some of whom are phenomenal and some of whom you won't know are terrible for, 2 or 3 funds. And that's the new normal, in my opinion. It's not going away. We're not going to have a contraction. We're just going to have a bunch of new funds over and over. It's the new, you start a successful company, you invest in people that you know who are known good, and you don't care what the ideas are. You look like a genius because they are good people.
Yeah.
Turns out that's not the problem you have when you run out of personal network to invest in, right? Then you become a professional and you have to think about these other things that you're not that good at. So figuring out who are the people who are good at doing this in the professional mode, I think, is where that money will train these people. And then those people will move towards these institutions who are happy to buy their IRR.
It's very hard for people to understand what's going on here, I think, because of the amount of startups that die and the amount of money that's put into those failed experiments. But they also don't look at the, how much cash Apple or Facebook or Google are throwing off now. You start looking at just the profitability of those 3 companies versus how much is put into venture. Like, those things are going to pay off hundreds of billions and eventually trillions of dollars in profits for what were venture-backed companies.
I mean, you hope you can get an Apple here and there.
Or an Uber or a Lyft, or Airbnb. I mean, all these things are getting there. What do we think the impact of the 2019 class is going to be? Pinterest, that doesn't seem like a great business.
I don't know.
Postmates doesn't seem like a great business.
Yeah, you got to respect I love Postmates just because I think they've just scrapped their way.
Surviving is they've done success for them. Yeah,
I mean, it's a wonderful story about a team. I mean, I think the underappreciated aspect of all of this is that there have already been a bunch of secondaries, right? I have friends who have bought city blocks who were Uber employees.
Yeah.
So I think it's overstated. Maybe we'll see, but I think people don't appreciate the extent to which money is already coming into the economy. So we talk about the housing boom.
Yeah.
These folks are already buying houses, at least the early employees.
For
so
sure.
there'll be some impact from these things, but not the sort of the classic Apple story where the day after the IPO, right, everybody's driving Ferraris.
Yeah, you're not going
in the
to have
parking lot.
that issue because the secondary market's super robust.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm getting emails every day about Robinhood and Calm and just everybody.
Yeah, and
wants
what's that, a 3-year-old, 4-year-old company, Robinhood?
I guess.
I know
4.
many of these companies now annually, they organize secondary sales. So
Yep.
they'll go to LPs who want to buy in, organize a secondary, the money comes in, and they just buy out employees for some
That's what
percentage.
SpaceX does. Every 6
Yeah.
months, my understanding is Elon gets a list of like who wants to sell, and they can sell like a little bit. He just approves it,
Yeah.
and then, stay private longer seems to have been a good idea. Do we think it's a good idea?
I mean, yes, but I'm going to put an asterisk on that. I want to ask maybe a potentially really dumb question.
Yeah.
You do that with enough frequency and with enough capital, and the company is doing well enough. Aren't you just creating a system by which you're showing the exit door to all of your team, your best people? Like,
I actually think about it the other way. I think actually Uber made this mistake where they had a bunch of people who hated their jobs.
well,
And
yeah,
they
you
had
definitely don't want to like handcuff people to the
it
desk.
just gets toxic, right?
for
If
sure.
somebody, I think that if your way of keeping people at the company is you can't afford to leave because you can't buy your options, it's very different than saying I'm going to top you up on new options
Totally.
and motivate you.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately, if you're not motivating your people by making it a place they want to show up and work,
Totally.
you're doing the wrong thing anyway.
It's going to get dysfunctional real quick.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I
Like-
think that was a real problem for Uber,
Yeah.
particularly. Just having friends who had gone through that mill, and
Yeah.
they're like, I hate it, but I can't leave. I can't afford to buy my
The
options.
solution's pretty easy, just giving people a year or 2 years or 3 years to execute their options.
Yeah, so we give people the number of years they've been with the company after 1 year. So
Okay.
if you've been with the company for a year,
You
then
get a
you
year.
get a year. If you've been with the company for
Ah.
less than a year, right? So, and then we cap that at 5 years.
Got it.
So at 5 years, you get.
Did you come up with
5
that, or
years.
your attorneys, or is that a new
I
standard?
came up with that.
You came up with
Yes.
that. Okay, so for people who don't understand, when you leave a company, you have options in the company. You have to pay to buy them. You have to execute them when you leave the company. You have 30 days typically, and you can get a big tax bill, and you can come out of pocket. So somebody leaving an Uber or an Airbnb, we could be talking about millions of dollars for
Yeah.
them to execute those options, which they then can't trade because they're not public yet.
Right.
So you're paying for something that's illiquid. And if you were at one of these companies, you probably didn't have a bunch of cash to begin with, because that's why you probably went there.
Well, and if you're at Uber, I mean, you probably know that stock's going to be worth something, but I can't tell you how many people I know who bought options in something that went to zero.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, employees are paying these companies when they leave after getting a crappy salary for years, and it's just broken.
It's
And
dark. Yeah.
You've kind of alluded to the tax problem. I mean, there's a legal fix to this.
Yeah.
The real solution, because you can allow somebody to execute for 5 years, but they then don't get the tax advantage, so it's not free to them.
It partially flips over, right? You get you get ISO standing, I think, for like a year, and then it flips over to NSO, which has other tax implications. And there's nothing we can do about that.
I've been
but
seeing
it's
this
not the worst thing.
shadow equity programs too. People are doing now, like when you are not a venture. I guess when you're a zebra, when you're a company that doesn't have intentions of being a unicorn, the zebra movement. I guess people do shadow equity. If you're at the company at the time it sells, the founder is going to put 20% on the side and just chop it up amongst the employees as a bonus. And you don't have to go through all this legal work. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
I have done that.
You've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did that when we sold Gadget.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
We
That
carved-
was
we
a
car- we
carve
car-
out.
We carved out. Well,
Yeah.
so we were given basically a pool of money to decide what we wanted to do with it. We could keep as much of it for ourselves, Peter and I, as we wanted. We carved out, I think it was like 20% for the team.
Let's get into this crypto winter. It's been now, when did it peak? December?
I have no sense of the timeline on it.
It's 2019. It peaked in 2017 in the Christmas, or was it? Yeah. So now we're over a year since the
Yeah, I guess it's
bubble
been about
burst.
a year, right? Since
Yeah. It peaked in December, 2 Decembers ago. So
Mhm.
we're now 18 months after this. Is there anything that's going to come out of this? And how will
Maybe, yeah.
we look back at this?
I mean, I think there are people still working hard on this, right? On various aspects of this. I have exactly one crypto investment in a stablecoin company. I think there's a real problem they can solve there.
Yeah.
But, I've sort of said, you're going to solve interesting problems by slaughtering some of these sacred cows in the religion of crypto.
Right.
And so that one, it's like, look, you're going to take a bunch of dollars and put them in the bank, and crypto people lose their mind when you start talking about that. But actually, it turns out there are a set of real problems you can solve for real people that way. I see, as I talk to crypto founders, like they're out there still building, because you forget they raised hundreds of millions of dollars.
EOS raised billions.
Tezos, I think you've talked to the
I
Tezos
had them
founders.
on the podcast. Yeah. They raised 100 or 200 million.
I mean, they've got a team sitting in France just building software. So I like that I've always felt like the market cap thing was a bug, right? We all lost our minds on this pyramid scheme. And what was interesting was the underlying technology. So I think actually the bear market accelerates the technology, because it gets rid of all of this noise, distraction noise. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
And the SEC has come down on a couple of these as well and made them reverse it,
which is great. I mean, they should put all those people in jail.
Yeah. I mean, it's just crazy.
I want to speak counter to that, though. I mean, if you have $100 million in the bank, and really like nobody's paying attention, what are you building and why and for
totally
whom?
Fair.
Right?
Totally fair.
I mean, like that is for me as like a serial entrepreneur, like that is the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Like not just overfunding what you're doing, but so massively overfunding what you're doing that like literally no one ever even has to work again. So what are we even doing with our time?
I mean, I think that's totally fair. I mean, my critique of this funding model was that we've gone back to waterfall development, right? So for folks, who have sort of not gone through the software development lifecycle, in the olden days of yore, we would write the spec and then we'd build for 5 years and then we'd ship something and know if anybody wanted it. Waterfall. Yeah. We decided that was a bad idea, right? So startups move towards this rapid iteration, shipping code all the time, learning all the time. In crypto, especially with the the big fundraise up front, is this let's just build for 5 years, off here, build protocol, and
what could go wrong?
Wants it. So I think that's totally fair. But at the same time, there's people sitting in a dark room somewhere building things, and maybe something will come of it. At least they're not being distracted by there was a period where everybody was quitting their jobs because they just had a bunch of Ethereum, and they're like, I guess I'm calling in rich now. That's gone away, which is positive.
Yeah. It was very troubling for me, having worked with Angellist and doing angel investing, having my own funds, to watch people do securities offerings without any consideration. Like in the early days of Angellist and when we were doing the syndicates, we were sitting there thinking about every aspect of how to do this right and do right by the founder and do right by the LPs and the syndicate members. And I just remember these early days of Navala and I talking like, should we do a company that's pre-product market fit? Should we do a bridge? Okay, how many months would this bridge last? Okay, let's set the bridge, if they're going to do it at 12 months, let's make sure we put that into the document so that people who are, and we really were thinking beyond whatever the SEC said. We were just thinking, what would make the investor on the other side feel better?
Yeah, I mean,
and these guys were doing 2-for-1 sales and
Well, I think the biggest problem that I had with it was that there was this lie that was like, this is the democratization of this stuff. And when in fact, what you saw was all the traditional investors front running these things, getting in at low prices. And then we'd go out to the public with these things and pretend that they were getting a great deal on them. I think what you're going to see in the next wave, if there's a next wave, is these things are going to look much more like traditional venture rounds. And that's going to be better for the companies. That's going to be better for the teams. And people who are angsty about, accreditation rules are just going to have to kind of deal with that.
It showed me just how powerful syndicates could be if we could do them on a global basis with no friction. Can you imagine if you could just syndicate a company and just put it on the web and anybody around the world could put money in?
Everybody wants to get rich quick.
Yeah. But people also want to be part of solving the world. I mean, if you look at Kickstarter and Patreon, there's also a patronage kind of piece to it. So that to me was the interesting part of it. People wanted to believe that you could tokenize Uber or tokenize Google search and they would be on a blockchain. And you could get 1 million people to put in $1,000 each and have $1 billion just materialize.
That was Telegram, I think.
That was Telegram, right?
Although I think actually, to be fair, they did everything accredited. So
I think they did to
everything
avoid
above the board, which is the smart way to do it.
Yeah. And also the accreditation rules are going to change. It seems the SEC has been mandated with like having a test maybe eventually. And your
there's
life
a
experience.
sophistication test which Angellist has been pushing.
Yeah.
I know they've upped the rules on or they've upped the limit on how many investors you can have in a fund, which is really good.
250 from 99.
Yeah,
It's been
yeah,
transformative
exactly.
for us.
Yeah, it's great, right? Because you can have people put in
Yeah.
$1,000 and you can put together a little bit bigger of a syndicate. So that kind of stuff is positive. I mean, I actually think the accreditation rules are pretty dang reasonable. Because if you think about it, if you're a founder, right, and you want to syndicate this thing, you can go do a deal with me and you can ask me to say that I'm accredited. I can give you my money and that kind of works. But if you're scamming someone's grandma out of money, the SEC can go after you. So I think that actually that balance works pretty well in practice. If we get this sophistication rule in there, I think that's going to be great, particularly for people in Silicon Valley or founders. So they don't have income, but they have a little bit of money to invest. So, they could move more quickly, but I understand why they don't. I mean, when you talk to people from the SEC, we're this teeny tiny little thing out here on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And they're thinking about not having another 2008. So they're kind of busy, fair. They'll get around to us eventually.
I just think if people could pass a test, that would be so great. Just like let them take an online test. Like we're doing this.
That could never be gamed.
Well, I mean, driver's license, gun license, like we license people. If you
don't get a
MBA
driver's license by testing online. You have to show up in person.
I think showing up in person would be fine or whatever, or taking a course in person, all that would be fine with me. I mean, to get accreditation to let you then do this.
Yeah, that said, in fairness, I think like pretty much everything in society should have a lot more testing involved. Like I think that you should probably be accredited before you have kids. I don't know, maybe that's really controversial, but like
I actually like if you have to be accredited to be a sanitation engineer and cut hair.
Well, those
exactly.
I'd go the other way. Those rules just shouldn't exist. These are just barriers to entry on these things.
So you want people to cut your hair with no license?
I'm smart enough to know if you give me one bad
PT's
haircut,
like, I cut this hair myself.
Yeah, exactly. I need a hair. I got a guy. DM me if you want my guy.
Is the guy on Church Street who does it on the corner?
No, I go high end.
You go high end?
I got a high end guy. With respect to the accreditation, I think it'd be great if you took some of the stuff from the Jobs Act, which I don't know that has worked very well because of the selection bias there, and just said, look, X% of your income, this much money in absolute terms, and sort of let more people in.
Yeah.
But it's not the on fire problem here.
Yeah, that would be nice. X% of your yearly net worth.
Or just net worth, right?
Net worth, yeah. 10% of your net worth or less. 20%. It would make things delightful. All right, when we get back, we're going to talk about Beto. Beto? How do you pronounce his name?
Beto, I think.
Beto?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Beto. Apparently he was a hacker and he was in the cult of the dead cow, whatever the hell that was. Salesforce is now doing Salesforce Essentials. It's the #1 way to do customer support, but it's going to be delivered to you at a startup price with a very simple setup. Startup Essentials users can get up instantly with easy out-of-the-box tools and support. And if you go to salesforce.com/twist, you will get a 50% discount with your annual contract and a free onboard training session. It's instant setup and you'll stand out with a full cycle customer support. Automatically connect multiple support channels, automate busy work and repetitive tasks, and customers can help themselves with a self-service support site. You'll sell more faster, everything you need in one screen. Track emails, calls, and meetings from your inbox, and you'll be able to scale your sales team with a full stack solution. You'll easily scale your sales team to win more customers and keep them happy by customizing with clicks, not code, and simple integrations to connect and integrate all data under one roof at one great price point. Get access to the world's #1 CRM at a cost fit for a startup by going to salesforce.com/twist. Yes, salesforce.com/twist. Get that 50% discount code with your annual contract. And welcome back to the family, Salesforce. It's great to have you here. Everybody knows Salesforce is where everybody winds up when you have an at-scale sales team. Well, they want to help you when you're just starting out, and they're doing that with that 50% discount for our listeners. All right. Beto.
Yeah.
The Great White Hope.
Very tall, very handsome.
He was a punk rock guy.
Yeah, Cult of the Dead Cow, which was amazing. I remember this from college, right? Downloading these tools and hearing rumors about these people.
Yeah.
A friend of a friend was in this
Explain
thing.
to people what Cult of the Dead Cow was.
So Cult of the Dead Cow, and feel free to jump in here if you know, I don't represent this properly, was a
Go for it. You got this.
Was a hacking collective, apparently started in Texas in the 90s. That was prominent because it released a lot of hacking tools to the general public.
Right.
Their big one,
Script kiddies. They made tools for
if you were a script kiddie, they were making things for you, but there was sort of this cultural component as well as this technical component.
Got it.
So they were trying to make statements about the future and think deeply about
Hacktivism.
technology. I thought this was really cool. This was a guy who was thinking deeply about the future of technology and its role in society in the 90s. And we got a guy in the White House who doesn't use email.
No.
You know, so whether this guy is the right guy or not, or the right person or not, is a pretty interesting thing to have on his resume.
I love that they pitched this as secret membership. Like, I don't know, is it really a secret? Like, we don't all talk about everything that we've ever done in our entire lives all the time.
Right.
Like, it's not a secret. He just like was talking about it. Like, we don't have to make that big of a deal about it.
Yeah.
And it's also really not that big of a deal if you've been in technology, if you've been around this stuff. Like, I don't know, like how many startups have you been at? You know, like what kinds of crazy shit have you done in the course of your career? Like,
I did phone freaking. And when I run for mayor of San Francisco, I'm just going to get it out on the table right now. We were phone freakers.
I had a red box. I had a blue box. Like, I don't know. I've never admitted that on air because I've just never really had an opportunity to talk about it.
It's got to be up, right? Statute of limitation from 1983 or 84 with a 300 or 300 baud modem.
I think you're.
I think I'm okay.
Yeah, I think you're.
I
okay.
think you're all right. Yeah.
Did you guys ever have a war dialer? You ever do that at home?
I did not have because I only had one phone line, and so war dialing. I had an app that would do like a limited amount of war dialing.
Yeah. For people who don't know, war dialing was just you dial random numbers and wait for a modem to pick up.
Yeah, try to find a
BBS. and then you try to break it. Yeah.
So what we would do is we would just set up our computers from like midnight when our parents would go to bed overnight until 6 a.m. We'd set our alarms at 6 a.m. and then we'd see if we got anything. And then you could set the war dialer to call the Sprint number. And the way the Sprint number worked, this is how Sprint used to work. You would dial an 800 number. It would ask you for a 5-digit code. If you had the wrong code, it went, But if you got the right code, it went, ching, and you got a dial tone. And then you could dial any number you wanted. Mm-hmm. So we would war dial and then random 5-digit code. And you wake up in the morning with 3 numbers. And then we would just trade them. And then you make unlimited free phone calls from school.
That's what we had to do before the internet, kids.
But nobody knew anybody who lived long distance. So like if somebody
was always the challenge.
That was the challenge. We didn't know anybody who didn't live in Brooklyn or Manhattan. So somebody would be like, oh, my aunt lives in Florida. Be like, oh, let's use the number.
Yeah, I remember having a blue box and a red box and trying to like figure out who I could call in Japan just so I could call Japan from my high school.
What we would do also is when we get these, and this is where it got dangerous, and we started to get into paranoia. Like when I saw Mr. Robot, I actually started to like have flashbacks. When we were kids, we would start calling BBSs in California or other states, bulletin board systems, which is long distance. But that required us to use the phone freaking codes we had gotten and stolen, or I'm sorry, procured or experimented with.
Discovered.
Uncovered. And we would be dialing like California and then be chatting in like a 3-line bulletin board system in California and downloading wares. And then we would get the wares hacked software. We get Chessmaster. We got like Chessmaster 2000 hacked from California. And we brought it to the East Coast bulletin board systems. So it was kind of like this like cross-country thing. But then we would think that the FBI, because they had knocked down doors and stuff like that, were outside our houses. So we'd be using it. And then we'd look outside our house to be a double parked car. We're like, there's a double parked car. Oh my God, it's a Lincoln Continental. It's like, oh my God, the feds are here. They're going to knock our door down. And it was just car service. It was just 86th Street car service waiting for somebody. Any new apps or startups on your phones?
Well, before we move on, can we just talk a little bit about, I think, what the meaning, though, to me at least, with this Beto news?
Yeah.
So I think culturally, at least in this country right now, there's still a lot of, so like within our community, right? Everyone's like, oh, that's so cool, Beto, right? He was like a hacker, or at least he was like a somehow affiliated.
Use a computer.
Yeah, the bar is very, very low for politicians, obviously. But I mean, within government, there's still a big stick up everybody's butt about security, right? And so if you are a white hat hacker and you disclose a security breach of some kind that you've discovered, you can be prosecuted and you can be thrown in jail. That is not the culture that we need to be building around technology.
No.
Right? It is hard enough to get people to spend time to actually attempt to do the right thing, break into a system, and then tell you how it works, and then give you a proper CVE. And the government is not there, right? So the fact that there's possibly someone who could maybe even fathom a world where people are out there trying to do the right thing and help make things more secure by breaking them, which is how technology works fundamentally. We make them more secure by breaking them.
Right.
I think that's a massive win. I don't think that's necessarily reason
what's the
to vote
Bill
for
Gurley investment, the Hacker
One.
Hacker One,
Yeah,
where
it's
you
a really great
incredible.
product, yeah.
They do bounties.
Yep.
So if you hack a company, they pay you. And in fact, Tesla just challenged people to hack the Model 3. And if you could hack the Model 3, you got the Model 3.
Yep. And somebody won it.
And somebody won a Model 3. So Elon's like, yeah, here's a $50,000 Model 3.
Yeah, so that works.
Thank you for...
I mean, I think practically the problem, like just give an example, is if you're a company and you have an API and you just are stupid and you design that API to leak information, and I use that API in the way that you designed it to download that information, I can go to jail. Like, that's where the law is at. That's nutso, right?
Yeah.
I didn't hack anything. I used your API. That's the level of understanding of the technology that is going into this policy and exists within the...
Which is what happened to Aaron Schwartz. I mean, he knew he was doing something wrong, but he was downloading papers.
Copyrighted content, I think, was the idea.
Academic papers, which you can get for free in the library. And he was just putting them on a hard drive for his own research. It wasn't like he was publishing to BitTorrent.
I think he wanted to distribute them, but even so,
it doesn't require you going to jail for 20 years.
Book at someone situation.
Yeah, he put a hard drive in a server closet.
Yeah, it's unclear to me whether this is a generational thing or just like, look, the kind of people who are going into politics in the future will still not look like us and have this context.
I don't think it's generational because most people still don't really fundamentally understand how technology works. Everyone uses it now, and everyone has an iPhone or an Android device in their pocket, but most people don't know how it works and don't understand the security implications and don't care about hacker culture and what makes a device or an ecosystem more secure. And that's okay, but we all do. And so I think it's up to us to promote this message that, going out there and trying to break into things, that makes them more secure.
You start to realize it when you go to your Facebook page and you try to turn everything off and delete all the data you have. And it's just like, I've been in there trying to delete everything and it's just so hard. And then you see like, oh, here's where Facebook knows your location. And I'm like, wait a second, how does Facebook know my location everywhere? It's like, oh, it's running in the background, deleting Facebook off my phone. So let's go there. The Mueller report came out.
It isn't out, right?
I'm sorry. The Bill Barr report is out.
Yeah, exactly.
The Barr report is out. Putting that aside, let's fast forward another year from now. Trump spends $100 million on Facebook and Instagram ads targeting them to the same people legally. What happens if he wins again? And he uses Facebook to target everybody and suppress the vote in certain communities and get the vote out in others. Facebook going to let him spend $100 million again, take the money?
Absolutely.
They're going to take it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's fine. I mean...
No, it's not, but they will do it. Yes, they should not, but...
Well, that's a question. Why not? Because of micro-targeting? You're opposed to it? In advertising?
Yeah, to a certain extent.
For
I mean, granted, for me, I opt out. I don't have a Facebook account. I do have an Instagram account. I rarely use it. I try to be on Twitter as little as possible. So I've kind of taken in, for our industry, pretty unusual turn for myself personally. Like I'm trying to opt out of social media. But no, I mean, Zuckerberg is not an idiot. He knows how unbelievably toxic this administration is.
Yeah.
And to enable that to continue, that you have a moral obligation to prevent that from happening and to create a framework by which that cannot happen again.
Do you think Zuckerberg is actually a secret conservative like Andreessen and Thiel?
No.
Thiel's not secret, but I think Andreessen's kind of secret. Mark Andreessen's kind of secret in his conservative.
He's probably
about it. He'll tell you his politics.
Yeah, he says he's a Democrat. I think he might secretly be like a conservative.
No,
I think he's just so repressed.
I think he's a Mitt Romney conservative. He's not a Trump conservative.
Right.
I think Zuckerberg. I think the general problem with the Zuckerbergs of the world in our world is that they don't. It's an inconvenient truth that these problems exist. They didn't sign up for it, right? The guys signed up to make a college network where you could find out the relationship status. Yeah. So they have this problem. They prefer to not think it exists. They're taking different sort of begrudging tactics to kind of deal with these things. I don't know what we're going to get out of them, but I don't think you can say we're not going to take money from this side and we're going to take money from this side. I think they could say we're not going to take money from anybody, because I haven't done the math, but I don't think it's that much money.
It would be like 1% of their revenue.
Yeah, it's not. So they could just say, look, like, we're so concerned about the idea of voter suppression.
That would be
ads,
the way to do it.
We're just not going to take any of these things. We'll see what they do.
I think that if they had any guts and they really wanted to rehabilitate their horrible image and the lack of trust people have and the declining nature of Facebook in America, they would just say, we're not going to take political ads. Or they could say, you can run a political ad, you cannot target it. You can't target it by state. Or maybe they just make a top-level target. You can target by state, but you can't go down to the community level, and you certainly can't do retargeting and specific ads against specific groups of people. I tend
to think if you just said we're not going to allow negative advertising broadly, just for anybody, right? So tell everybody how great Trump is, but don't tell everybody how bad the other guy is.
Yeah, you can't do oppo stuff. That could be a solution.
I mean, I've talked to some Facebook people in general about the idea of saying, like, look, if you're uncomfortable with this idea of fake news versus non-fake news, let's think about this axis of positive versus negative sentiment, because we'd all probably be a lot happier if we saw more of the positive stuff. And that's, not necessarily a trivial issue, but is an interesting way to think about the content environments that we're subjecting people to and how they feel about themselves afterwards.
Also, I got a crazy idea, which I don't know if they'll take, but I was thinking maybe for the next election to not allow political ads paid for in rubles.
I'm not sure that's going to fly.
Or how about not from Cayman Island LLCs?
Yeah, I think they're working on some of that stuff.
So supposedly they have solved that problem. Supposedly.
Really?
Yeah. So they now ask for American identification for any political advertising.
I mean, to be serious though, the real problem there is, like, it's not the money spent on ads. We talk about the number of money spent on the ads, but you can spend a lot of money in creating organic content.
That's what people don't understand.
So if you spend $20 million creating organic content, you actually get more reach with that. And the data on this is pretty dang interesting. How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
It's not like you can put disclosures on that. You can just limit ad budgets. I mean, that's really the
I think the state of the art is to create a series of ads and themes and then test them with small dollar amounts and then plow the money into the winning test, obviously, which is what I think they did. The wall and lock her up, and a lot of the catchphrases seem to be things that they tested in the laboratory of A/B testing, multivariate testing on Facebook and other places. It's just super sinister when you think about it.
Mm-hmm. No, it is. I mean, this is a frame for our national political environment, right? Like, every campaign is national now, and they all align with these issues, and you can micro-target everybody, so you can suppress the other guys and try to enrage your folks so they come out.
So this is the cocktail question that I now ask people, and you never know what kind of answer you're going to get, or if you're even going to get an answer. But just to think about, are we better off without all social media? You get social media as we have it today, or no social media, no Facebook, no Twitter, no YouTube, no Tumblr, no Reddit.
Are we
society is society better off without social media at this point now in 2019?
That's a good question. I'm thinking about the amount of...
there was one off switch.
Yeah. I get it. I'm thinking about the anxiety that it produces on an individual basis and the FOMA in young people and this desire to keep up with the Joneses and front and flex and whatever. I'm going to go ahead and say blogs are not social media, right? I'm going to be curmudgeonly and just say I liked blogging was my best moment for the internet.
Yeah,
I felt that was the
whole grain social media.
It's whole grain social media. It's like a little bit more rich.
If you create it and host it yourself, that's not social media.
Right.
But if a company is hosting everyone's content, I'll call that social media.
See, it was so much more sophisticated back then. You'd write a blog post, you get backlinks, which you had the choice to list underneath your blog post or not, if you wanted to. So somebody could link to you, and it would automatically place it. You had Technorati, you could see who was linking to each other and what posts were rising and falling. It just felt more intellectual and considered.
It was also a smaller internet.
This stuff is all new. I mean, I think that's when I'm feeling optimistic. I think we're going to adapt to this stuff just as humans, right? We're in this early phase of all of this technology, really the internet broadly, but particularly social. So, maybe our children will use this stuff in a much better way than we do because we're addicted and we do stupid things. And maybe we will figure out how to use it better. So when I'm feeling optimistic, I think it's not social media that's the problem, it's us, and we'll adapt.
Sometimes what we're seeing with online bullying and, to your point, flexing, which is having real world repercussions in, underserviced communities. I'm not at all certain that the next generation is using this better than us. I think that they're using it far worse than it because they swim in it. They don't even see it. They don't know where the boundaries are between that and real life.
Yeah.
I mean, we all grew up not on the internet.
The flip side of that, though, is you have people finding their communities. It's the transgendered kid over here and so on.
Totally.
So
that's why it's a really challenging question.
You talk about like the bullying and the sort of elevated suicide rates and these sorts of things. Like there's an open question. Do those just stay where they're at, or is there
it's going to increase, I think. I think the amount of psychological stress that social media puts on you. We're adults who are successful in this incredible industry. We know how technology works. We get anxiety from it.
And I think all white, male, unbelievably
Last
privileged.
Time I checked. This is the white. Welcome to This Week in White Male Privilege. I'm your host, Jason Calcanis, coming around the horn.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Right?
Yeah.
You don't get to be in a better position than the position that we get to occupy.
The thing that is also heartbreaking to me is people used to have a little bit more independent thinking. Like they would look at a situation and say, okay, let's think about this Mueller report and the Barr thing. Let me try to.
Though?
I felt like it was when you're face to face with people.
The good old days were never as good as we remember them.
It just feels so like everybody's reaction is so tribal now. And in order to get outrage points, like the name of the game is to be outraged, and how much outrage points can I get? Like this kid who did the fake attack in Chicago, the Empire actor. Is now
Wasn't he just exonerated?
He was just exonerated. So now there's like a whole nother outrage on the right. And they're, after everybody was outraged that he was a gay man who was
anti-MAGA. Yeah.
MAGA went after him, and then it was fake, and now he's released. And it's just, I can't keep up with the rage. So toxic.
So you're not going to flip the switch on social media. You're going to keep it going. See where it goes.
I think that it's obviously an interesting intellectual exercise, which in practice, we're going to keep using this stuff. I think the jury's still out. I think we got to figure out, like I think about my kids are a little bit young, right? They don't have phones. They don't have any of this stuff. So I think about, well, what am I going to do when they get there? I think we're going to do things like say, look, the phone stays in the living room. And I'm going to have to do that myself, which is tough. Not bring it to the dinner table, not have it around. I think we're going to have to just figure out coping mechanisms for these things. And I think actually, the technology will adapt as well. I think when you look at Facebook, for example, I personally think that as they think about long-term sustainability, this is not good. If you show up and everything in your feed makes you angry, like that's not, it's short-term engaging, but long-term, I think that's not as sustainable as something that might be less of that, or maybe a little bit more of this whole grain media. So I think actually the platforms are aligned with this long-term. It's just hard to see this in the short-term metrics.
It's also toxic. Yeah. I had my most productive time when I took all the social media apps off my phone. I was blogging. I was finished my book. And now I'm just back to like, I wake up in the morning, I look at trending topics, I go to bed, I'm checking my app mentions. It's so negative.
Well, we live in an era of self-control, right? Like you have an infinite amount of sugar and social media and all of these, drugs and whatever else, right? Like you've got to figure out how to live as a human in that world.
Yeah. Anybody got a favorite app right now? Favorite app?
I really like Bear.
What's Bear?
Bear. It's great. It's a note-taking app. It is on iOS and Mac. It syncs, and all of your data lives in your iCloud, CloudKit data store. It's really nice. It supports Markdown natively. Unfortunately, you can't collaborate with other people on it, so it's just you. But it's just really, really nicely done.
Bear.
Yeah, that's the one. I think. Yep, that's the one.
Oh, I've heard of that. I have one for the audiophiles. This is called Audm, 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 Audm. And what they're doing is they are they have voiceover artists who are reading New Yorker, Atlantic, Wired, Vanity Fair, Outside Magazine stories. And so, when I'm doing my commute or I'm working out, I can listen to a New Yorker story, not with text to speech, which is horrible, but with an actual voiceover artist. And
is
it's
it
like,
free? Do you pay
I think
for
it's
art?
$10 a month or $5 a month. $5 a month, and I'm more than willing to pay it. It really is working out super nicely for me. The other thing I'll just say is, if you haven't paid for the YouTube Plus, the ad-free YouTube,
Is it
it used to be Red. I don't know what they call it now.
Something else Plus, yeah.
I think they keep changing the name, so they're very confused. But that Red service, you don't realize how many times you hit the next or skip ad button until you have this.
Yeah.
And when you have kids and you're watching like some of the kids stuff, kids YouTube doesn't have ads, I don't think. But just on regular YouTube, taking out the ads is so delightful. What's your favorite app right now?
I'm going to give a shout out to Breaker, which is a podcast app.
Yes.
Really interesting product, really well designed. They get all the basic things right. And then you've got these social features. They sort of surface content in an interesting way. So I'm addicted to podcasts.
Give us your top 3.
Oh, boy.
Give us ones we wouldn't know.
What are ones you wouldn't know? I was telling you before we started the show about this one called Slow Burn, which is a serial about, they did...
oh, yes. This is Watergate.
They did Watergate, and then they did the Clinton impeachment.
Oh,
right?
really?
And both of them are wonderfully well reported. That was a Slate podcast. Their business model is interesting, right? Because they give you this content, and then they have a subscription service where you can pay for extra content, which is a really nice model.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a great serial one. I regularly listen to Econ Talk as one that maybe you know.
No, I don't. Econ Talk. Huh?
Econ Talk is a phenomenal podcast out of the Hoover Institute. Russ Roberts does wonderful interviews where he reads a book, gets the author on, talks to the author. Boy, what else is good on there?
What do you pay for? Do you pay for any podcasts?
It's hard to pay for. It's hard to pay for audio.
I have 2.
What do you pay for?
I pay for the Bret Easton Ellis podcast on Patreon. He charges like $10 per podcast, but he's a writer, so he does like, he's a writer, so he writes like an essay and then he reads it, and he's just like a really great essayist. And then, obviously he wrote Less Than Zero and American Psycho, but he's sort of a free thinker. And he, like, when he talks about film and politics, gender and race and just everything, he's a real iconoclastic sort of outsider guy. And then Preet Bahar now has Cafe Insider at cafe.com, where if you don't get enough of Stay Tuned with Preet, he does with this other woman, I think her name is Ann Milgram. They were both attorney generals, and they just talk about the law.
Oh, that's
I believe you mean attorneys general?
Attorneys general.
Sorry, classic.
And they actually go through grammar constantly and argue over grammar.
What matters in the law? I mean, the law is like a executable specification subject to interpretation.
And Making Sense with Sam Harris. And then now Naval is doing his.
Yeah, Naval has done his, yeah.
Naval is doing like 3 to 6 minute, like best of, like based on his best tweets. It's really good.
Yeah. Another one I'll give a shout out to, actually, because there was a real topical episode, is Intelligence Squared. So they broadcast them on NPR, but they do the great podcast. And the one I just listened to was, can constitutional free speech principles save social media companies from themselves? It's an interesting debate. So they get a couple people arguing for the proposition, against the proposition. And the point is not so much to get to an answer, but to really deeply explore the issues. So, I mean, I think it's a really thoughtful, just a thoughtful discussion, and you learn something coming out, and you probably end up less decided, but more informed.
So you know what is like podcasts, but is actually in many ways even better than podcasts, that I recently discovered, because they are deeper better researched and don't have ads is audiobooks.
Yes.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
I've actually been listening to a lot of audiobooks lately, and
Me
it's
too.
really like replaced a lot of my podcast listening. I know I'm like maybe 20 years late to the party, but I don't know.
No,
I'm into it.
I'm still late to the party, so I should get
I always had this like religious position.
I'm not invited to the party, so
I had this religious position that it's like, it's not really reading if it's an audiobook,
Yeah.
but like, you know what? Just, I don't know. There's all this content that I'm just never going to actually get around to physically reading with my
audiobooks are the
eyeballs,
bomb.
and I consume it now, and it's
I
great.
mean, so my hack is like everybody who writes a book now goes on the podcast tour because it's a good way to sell a book.
Yep.
So it's like you should listen to 2 or 3 interviews with
Right.
an author
Yeah.
before you even attempt the book.
That's like the
for
first.
sure.
That's a very similar to the first 2 chapter hack. right?
Yeah,
Where it's like
sure,
you read,
sure.
or whatever. You read the first 2 chapters and the last chapter, and then you got the book.
I listened to the Threat. Andrew McCabe, the former FBI guy, it's actually really good. It's not just about the Trump situation. It's about his whole life as an FBI agent. And Preet Bahar's Doing Justice just came out. I'm halfway through that. And then I did James Comey's book about the Justice Department. And like it's really interesting to understand, like we're getting this incredible civics lesson and justice lesson, like how this all works. Really, really good. Like deep how these things function and who the people are. And the other one I've been telling people about, and we're going to have Mike Ovitz on the program, but who is Mike Ovitz? If you haven't listened to it, is fascinating. I mean, he just talks about how he built CAA and like building power.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And like how he got Jurassic Park made and how he got Rain Man made, all these books from our youth. I'm sorry, movies from our youth, and just how much effort it took for him to get them over the line, and then how he just took. I'm very interested in systems thinking, like how products get into the real world and interface, because everybody makes a good product in Silicon Valley today, but it's like, well, what's your go-to market, and what happens to those products when they're in the real world, and how does the world react to them? And there's so many people who know how to make beautiful, perfect products, but they don't know actually what's going to happen when that runs into the world, or the developers in your case would begin, or whatever it is.
I mean, it's all the same thing, You're just making something for somebody.
Right. But then thinking about how it gets out there to the real world is super interesting to me. All right, listen, this has been an amazing episode. PT, anything to plug? You have a fund, or
you can find me on Angellist. I invest almost exclusively out of an Angellist syndicate. Do maybe 5-6 deals a year, try to be highly selective, seed through Series B-ish. And
what is the average check size that you do with your syndicate total?
Probably a couple $100K. I mean, it depends on the round, right?
Right.
You do a Series A, Series B, it might be $1 million if it's really kind of.
Are you
working.
full-time at Angellist still, or no?
No, part-time there. So I sit on their investment committee, work a little bit with LPs and with the community. So, try to be a good steward of community capital. And then the rest of my time I spend running around trying to help companies, try to find good companies to invest in so that I can work for them for free.
Yeah.
And, keeps me busy.
Angellist doing $10-20 million a year in jobs, I heard.
I cannot. I saw the numbers this morning. I probably shouldn't say the numbers.
Am I in the ballpark?
They're kicking butt.
Yeah, kicking butt is what I
mean,
hear.
if you want to hire for a startup, Angellist is a phenomenal product. Call them, talk to them. It'll blow your mind.
And are you guys launching new syndicates now, or when angel investors come, they tell me they get sort of directed towards micro funds, like 5 or 10 investments?
The evolution of the platform is very much trying to keep up with the career of these investors like myself.
Yeah.
Right? So you start out, you're doing a deal here and there. Eventually, you graduate to some dedicated capital, and it's better to have dedicated capital for certain sorts of things. So
you can write a quicker check.
Yeah, exactly.
And
you can write the check, you can commit, you know how much. So Angellist is very much evolving the product to better serve small managers. I mean, anybody who has a sub $20 million fund who doesn't call Angellist and get a quote on being their back office is just nuts.
Yeah.
So I think that's previously the path was you started out using the product and it worked for you.
Yeah.
And then you outgrew it.
Right.
And so trying to grow with those customers as they grow is basically the current.
That was always the critique. Is it be like, is it the farm league to going to get partner if you go through Angellist. But now people are actually starting their funds and staying independent.
Yeah,
and
so I think the
staying on
syndicates
platform.
product works phenomenal for people who are operators who want to do some deals here or there.
Right.
And for the people who are really serious, that's a path towards this dedicated fund structure.
Got it. Hey, just a couple of things for us here at Launch. Angel University Tour is happening in April. I'm going to be teaching our Angel University course, speaking of angels. It's based on my book, but with a lot of other practical stuff. It's a half-day workshop. We're doing it in DC, Boston, Columbus, New York City, and Miami. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cities. And you'll learn all the strategies I use to invest in over 200 startups and hit 7 unicorns and counting. You can reserve your spot at angel.university. And the accelerator deadline for Launch Accelerator is April 3rd. I think that's Wednesday, next Wednesday. So go to launchaccelerator.co. We're looking for companies in our Goldilocks zone. You don't have your Series A yet, but you do have a product in market with a little bit of traction. And we're giving away another 500 tickets to Founders for Launch Festival Sydney. Go to launchfestivalsydney.com/founderpass if you're a founder. Any plugs? Can people use begin.com yet?
Super soon.
Super soon. So
Yeah.
is there a sign up form there?
There is a sign up form.
So go to begin.com, put in your email, and be ready to go.
Well,
and then
ish. You sign up with your GitHub, but
sign up with your
same
GitHub.
thing.
Exactly. Follow PT, follow Ryan. He's not on the... and what zone you said you like to meet founders when they're in the sort of ideation phase or MVP
as
or
early
off
as
it?
possible. I mean,
Early.
I love folks early. I don't like. I'm working on a deal right now where the founder built a Twilio app. They got 500 people using it, no paying customers. I mean, it's great, right? If you can meet them early and help them, we can set them up for success. But just closed a deal that was a Series B. That's a 5-year-old company. So wherever
The
works.
ranges.
Yeah, I mean, that's the luxury of a syndicate versus a dedicated fund model,
Right.
is you get to work with anybody who's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't have to kind of stay in a lane.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that you've chosen to stay that early. We've chosen to stay early, but our Goldilocks zone is kind of pre-Series A, Series A, pre-Series A, but post getting the product finished.
Yeah.
Because there's so many companies now.
Yeah, you know a lot more. I mean, I think that you have to extrapolate from very qualitative data early, and some people are relatively more comfortable that way or less. It's definitely much easier to know whether you have a real product when you have some unit economics and some customers that are paying and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's just so many people with ideas. How do you what's your first level filter when it's that early?
People.
Just the person.
I mean, it's very cliche, isn't it? I mean, don't you feel like you have learned some hard lessons that were cliches that you didn't internalize when you started?
Yeah.
I feel like I have. So.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a cliche. I mean, that is
ultimately
it, right?
I think that's the venture cliches. It's all about the people, and you hear that and you're like, yeah. And then you do a deal with it where it was a bad person who had one phenomenal idea and then they just do it wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's interesting is a lot of venture capitalists tout that line, but they don't actually live that line, right?
Yeah.
When they say people and they say quality people, they're really actually just resume checking.
Yeah.
A lot of people, not saying you're doing that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, given the number of startups, the VC firms have just been able to go downstream so far now. They're just like, yeah, come back when you have 4 million in revenue and we'll do the Series A. I'm like, wait a second, wasn't 4 million the Series A dollar amount?
Look, I always joke that everybody is attached to their variable name, but their business model is changing. They just set aside the variable names. Your $4 million revenue investment because you got $1 billion fund. That's fine. Call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
You just be comfortable with your variable. We'll just invent new ones that are in front of you.
Yeah. It is interesting how the VCs are just not doing what you're doing or even what we're doing. They've just totally said, everybody else take that space.
That's fine. They're innovating in their own way. I mean, there's some phenomenal innovation late stage, so I don't poo-poo it,
No.
I love what, like Andreessen, for example, or Softbank. It's fun to watch. It's like my sports,
Yeah, watching them write $100 million checks into companies that just are very low revenue, and these are big bets to make.
I don't know if you're trying to sign off right now, but if you're not immediately trying to sign off, I would love to pick that a little bit more. What is innovative there? It's just bigger and bigger checks in companies that are, have more and more strong signals behind them.
I think it depends which one you're talking about because they're different, right? Like, so SoftBank is maybe the most interesting in that they sort of said, we're going to raise a fund so large that we are a market of one. So they'll come to you and say, we'll write you a $400 million check, or we'll write your competitor a $400 million check, but there's no second $400 million check. So call it whatever you want, but it's interesting and new, right? And they've created an alternative path to liquidity and to scale aside from the public markets.
I call it the Masa IPO. It's the Masa IPO.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just literally he can IPO your company. I mean, he sort of IPO'd Uber with that last secondary at 60 whatever billion. And what did they do? He bought $15 billion worth or $12 billion.
I forget what the number
was. It was over 10. It was a large amount. He bought 15% of the company or something.
So whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, it's just fun to watch people try these very ambitious things. I think Andreessen, when they came into the market, they said, look, like they have a reputation for overpaying. I think it's a little bit unfair. I think that they said, look, we're going to come into this market and we're going to build a Series A firm in a mature market. And that's really hard, right? With this sort of rich get richer problem. And they did it. Right. And so now.
No, they're on the top of everybody's list.
Yeah,
of like, if you're going to go to like if you're going to go to the top 7 firms, they'd be on the list.
So, I mean, I think they did that by building the CAA of venture, right? Yeah. So they thought very deliberately about how are we going to be differentiated in this market. And then they went and did deals like they put $100 million into GitHub at, do you remember the valuation?
No, it was
7-point-something billion exit.
Crazy. Yeah.
So I think you are seeing some interesting innovation, and sometimes it's perceived as just like, oh, they're just throwing money at the problem. I think there are other people doing less interesting things.
The internal idea there, from what I heard from people there, was hire people who've already had an exit and don't need the management fees of the funds. So if they hire partners, you have to have already been an operator and sold your company, made $100 million or $50 million. So you don't need the salary. Then put those salaries into the services layer, marketing.
That was the first generation. I think they brought on a set of partners now. I think they're kind of going through a generational change where they brought on a set of partners who maybe aren't as rich but are highly motivated. And I mean, I think that
helps for diversity too. I mean,
well, they've also evolved, right? Like, you start out with an idea and the market changes and your understanding of the market changes. And I think I just think that's a well-managed organization, particularly for a large firm in terms of staff, right?
I wonder how many people are there.
I don't know. It's probably 100 plus.
Yeah, it's got to be.
I think you can also respect the other complete opposite, which is the Sequoias of the world, which are like, no, we do the same thing we did 30 years ago.
Yeah.
We're just really good at it, right? We're just really focused on being excellent at what we do. And I mean, excellence is always fun to watch. They always had a
recruiting partner there. They just didn't have a recruiting division like Andreessen Horowitz had 5 recruiters or something.
Yeah, although I don't think that's where, like, recruiting partners to me are somewhat useless. I think actually even with Andreessen, their sort of their market team is much more interesting. Like, we'll connect with companies and so on. They just work really hard. They're really humble. They really have internalized a set of principles that allow them to see these opportunities and often win them.
Yeah.
So, people are going to have different strategies. We can respect these things. And it's kind of, fun to appreciate the nuances of it when I think from the outside, you sort of think of these folks as dudes playing golf. That's, a lot of them are working hard, the good ones.
There's a lot of criticism of the venture industrial complex. And I look at it, I'm like, these are some pretty amazing companies that they're so powerful that now we have a presidential candidate whose platform in 2019 is break up big tech. Like, that's where we're at. Literally a presidential candidate. Elizabeth Warren is running on Amazon Basics. Like, I mean, she's got a pretty refined take on it. She's like,
yeah, I mean, she's taken the open market stuff.
Yeah.
So she's taken a think tank and sort of said, we're going to take your way of looking at this one issue. I'm going to run on a sort of a portfolio of issues, and this will be one of them. So
I thought that was interesting, though. I don't know if you heard her talking about it, but you could tell she was parroting a little bit, but it was pretty well done. She's like, listen, if you make a really cool product and you put it on Amazon, you have no choice because that's where the customers are. Then they study your data and they build an Amazon Basics product and they undercut you.
Wait until she learns what Target is doing.
I know, exactly. But she's like, if you're going to be the platform,
that's not even the worst thing that Amazon does.
Well, she's like, Apple has like an app store, and they shouldn't, they should let other app stores on the iOS thing, and they should let other marketplaces, like for buying audiobooks. Like, why do you, when you buy an audiobook, do you have to go to the web browser to buy your Audible book and then go back to your app? Makes no sense. All right. This has been This Week in Politics with 3 cis white males. We'll see you next time on This Week in Startups. Bye-bye.